My name is Santiago. I'm from Malaysia. But here I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes to talk about the challenges that we face in Southeast Asia and especially in Malaysia as a way of trying to understand the challenges people face, including resistance groups, activists, NGOs, and so on and so forth. ASEAN, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, makes up about 10 different countries in the region. You have the more advanced countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and you also have the less developing countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. You also have Brunei. So altogether, the 10 countries. I might have missed one, but there are 10 countries in total, and we are the fastest growing region in the world. Fastest growing region in the world. Now that does not mean that we are equal society, no. We are one of the most unequal society that you can find. Now let me give you the numbers for the level of inequality in Southeast Asia. For example, in Vietnam, according to Oxfam, the country's richest man earns more in a day than the poorest person earns in a decade. That tells you the level of disparity. Now this similar pattern you see all over the region. For example, in Indonesia, for example, 4 richest men, unfortunately all are men, have more wealth than 100 million of the country's poorest people. Again, demonstrating the level of inequality that you find not only in Vietnam, Indonesia, but the rest of the region as well. Now, looking at access to healthcare, one of the challenges that we face is that as a result of privatization over the last 10-15 years, people's access to a fundamental right called healthcare is challenged. And therefore, the out-of-pocket that you pay from your own pocket towards healthcare is increasing. Given wage stagnation across the board in the region, as a result of outsourcing and the attack against trade unions and so on, as a result of a decrease in the wages and also increasing privatization in the region, more and more people are outside are unable to access healthcare, if you want, unable to access healthcare. But having said that, you have some very innovative poor financing schemes. For example, you have a health card and 30-baht scheme in Thailand, health fund for the poor in Vietnam, health equity funds in Cambodia, and in Malaysia we have a very successful Peduli Sehat in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, for example, the Peduli Sehat, which means Peduli means interest in people. It's a translation. Peduli is interest in people, and that gives you. Last year, the state government will give you 500 ringgit, which is about $90 US. Depends on the exchange rate, but $90 US towards healthcare if you're earning less than 2,500 ringgit in Malaysia. Now this year it increased to 700 ringgit. So this is the kind of support that the state gives you. This is a state, I don't mean the entire country, but the state that I come from, Selangor, which I'm going to talk about in a short while in more detail. So although we are under attack in terms of access to healthcare, but there are some innovative poor financing schemes, like I just said, health card in Thailand, health fund for the poor in Vietnam, and the health equity funds in Cambodia, and the Peduli Sehat in Malaysia. Now, in terms of public spending for education, the poor Southeast Asian countries spend less than 4% of GDP on education. So, for example, countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, and so on, will spend 4% of GDP on education, which is dismal, I must say. Now, for example, a rich country like Malaysia should not be spending, we only spend 4% of GDP towards healthcare. But it's a commitment with the new government that it will go up to 7% in the next, 7% of GDP in the next 3 to 4 years. Unemployment rate, the same situation. We have high levels of unemployment in the region, and most of the countries have not ratified the ILO Convention 156, which is workers with family responsibilities. And we also have many countries in the region that are very, very far away from signing on to the ILO Convention 87, which involves freedom of association, the rights to organize, and so on and so forth. So essentially what you see in the region, what you see is a region is a whole lot of people being thrown out of the system, people who have families who have to fend for themselves without state support. Now that is in the realm of socio-economic development. But if you look at the political development in the region, it's actually quite bad, quite dismal. For example, in Cambodia for example, right now, there is this huge effort by the ruling junta, the ruling government, the family of the Prime Minister, who actually is now out there to maintain power and wealth accumulation for the next so many years. Takes 10, 15 years if it's possible. And he actually made a political party, a credible political party, which could possibly take over the government in these elections. It made it illegal. So therefore, the members of the CNRP, for example, will not be able to contest in the elections. So therefore, Hun Sen will win the elections hands down. And you win elections with hope or with fear. Here you win elections in the case of Cambodia, in other parts of the region, you win elections by fear. Not by hope, but by fear. Now this is not really a good way to win elections, but it doesn't speak well for democracy. And why is democracy important? If people's voice are not being heard, if people's voice are being put down, if people's voice are being completely marginalized, then people's interests are not taken into consideration. People's aspirations are completely thrown out of the table. So what you really are looking at is this elite control of the region. The elite control of the region. This is danger. Whether it's Philippines, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Malaysia, Thailand, the elite seem to have a complete control of the region with one or two exceptions. But in general, the entire control is with the elite of the region. Now, China's role in the region is also very important. China today underwrites Cambodia, for example, underwrites a country like Malaysia, underwrites the expenditures of Thailand, of Myanmar, and so on and so forth. And you see how China is now becoming a major player, both on security issues, but on economic development issues of the region. But more so, it undermines the local economic and political development in the region itself. So for example, one of the biggest supporters for most, for Cambodia, for example, is China. I mean, you can kill 10 people in the streets, you can kill so many people in the streets, but China will say that's fine, it's okay. It's a domestic issue, it's okay. For example, the massacre in Myanmar, for example, involving at least about 1 million Rohingyas. China said it was fine, it's okay, it's a domestic problem. As long as the government is stable, that's what matters to us. So clearly, China's role in the region, I can go on and on this, in terms of security, in terms of arms sales, in terms of control, political control, including foreign affairs of the region, is highly in the hands of China. So China has become a big player, and there's nobody in the region who wants to challenge China, including, I don't see much criticism coming away from our NGO, civil society groups, trade unions on China's very powerful role in the region. So you really have a problem. You really have a problem in the region where you have high levels of inequality. People's access to healthcare is not there. It's few and far between. People's health to education, the right to organize, the right to form unions is very challenged. It's highly challenged. Now, having said that, I would like also to share with you a development, a major development, a very recent development in my own country, Malaysia. For the first time after 61 years, we have a new government in Malaysia. We have a new government in Malaysia. Now, this is, for lack of another way of saying it, a miracle of sorts. A miracle of sorts. Nobody dreamt and nobody thought that a change in Malaysia would ever happen. Because every time there is an election, it is always fought around race and religion. It's fought on race and religion. You might be the most poorest person, but because of religious issues, and because of racial issues, you will vote to maintain the power that the government of the day, which was the former government. But this time, something snapped. Something snapped in the country. And I would like to share with you what was that snapping. a combination of things. But one of the most important is, in the state that I come from, Selangor, is the social policies which the government of Selangor introduced in the last 8 to 10 years. The government of Selangor has been with opposition, with my party and so on, for the last 8 to 10 years. As part of a social policy or social engineering that it put forward, one of the things it did was to deal with the rising cost of living in Malaysia. The rising cost of Malaysia was extremely very high. It was extremely very high as a result of 10, 15 years of wage stagnation in the country. And you have people unable to put food on the table. We will have food, you will have rice on the table, but this will not be food that you will actually able to sustain your body and yourself. So a recent UNICEF study in the urban parts of Malaysia showed, by the way, Malaysia is a rich country, by the way, very, very rich country. I see this part of Barcelona far more poorer than Malaysia. Yeah, I'm serious. It's far more poorer than Malaysia. It's a very rich country, but the inequality is amazing, shocking, right? So people who are workers, generally workers, will not be able to put nutritious food on the table for their families. This it became a major issue in the last so many years, given that the government also introduced a new tax called Goods and Services Tax at 6%, which really pushed the prices and the cost of living very, very high. So the state government that I come from, which was part of the opposition then, but which is now which was part of the opposition but ran the government, introduced a whole variety of social policies. One of it, as I mentioned earlier, is called the Peduli Sehat, which is for healthcare. It's a healthcare card which will give you last year 500 ringgit and this year 700 ringgit towards healthcare for the family of people who earn less than 2,500 ringgit. Number two, it did something else. It actually introduced what you call a KISS program, KISS. Kasih Ibu Smart Selangor. Kasih Ibu means the love of the mother. Love of the mother. I mean, when I translate, it doesn't sound, doesn't get the point. But it's a love of the mother in Selangor, something like that. Selangor is the state that I come from. What it did was, it will give a poor family who earns less than 2,500 ringgit, 200 ringgit worth of food stuff on a monthly basis for 1 year, that is 2,400 ringgit. So 200 ringgit worth of food that you need to reproduce your family at a sustainable level, at a higher level of in terms of food value, nutritious food will be provided if you earn less than 2,500 ringgit. We also provide free water, 20 cubic meters of free water to all households across the board, whether you are poor or rich in the region. We also provide 1,000 ringgit towards education. If you are enrolled in a local university, you're doing a degree program, or you're doing a diploma program. And for poorer schools, the state government pumps millions of ringgit into the Tamil schools, into the Chinese schools, into vernacular schools, in order to make sure that the children are given the best education possible. Although they all come under the federal government, education comes under the federal government, but the state government actually pumps lots of money into these schools in order to make sure that the teacher-student, the learning process, the teaching process is efficient, and the school's results also increases. And for healthcare, for example, we have mammogram for women, we have cancer care for people who have cancer, because very high levels of cancer in the country. We also have a whole variety of healthcare programs, which was a major attraction to most people. Now the point I want to make is this, that social programs are crucial. Social programs are crucial in bringing about a change in the way you organize the country, in the way you manage, especially the transition from wherever you are, whichever level of class that you belong to a different level of access to food care. I mean, say it more carefully. Social policies are helpful in order to access healthcare, access food, access education, and access a better quality of life. And I can see that in the state that I come from. This is quite clear, very, very clear. Parents tell me, I'm a member of parliament, parents tell me, when I visit them, parents tell me that it's because of the food that is given by the state that today they can use the savings to provide better education for their children. It's because of the money given by the state, today lots of children can have infant food, for example, and have access to the hospitals. So I think state's ability to ensure a better quality of life, better standard of living, as well as access to basic fundamental reproduction services can be assured. And I think this was one of the reasons why in the recent elections which finished a month ago, this party that I come from, the party that I work with, was able to win 51 of the 56 seats in the country, in the state, which was a clean state. In fact, on paper, it would have been very, very close. On paper, we were not sure we were going to win. On paper, I mean. But because of race and religious issues, it's always difficult to predict. But the social policies that are introduced by the government in the last so many years made the difference. Made the difference. When people have access to healthcare, when people have access to food, when people have access to education, and they can see changes in their lives, they can see mobility in their lives, a potential for mobility, when they can see that their children or their infant children are able to have milk in their homes, this makes a big difference in the lives of people, and it makes a big change in the way we organize our rights, our responsibilities as a government, and access to a variety of healthcare support systems and so on and so forth. So I think all I want to say is, this is a very long way of saying that social policies are important. Social policies are important, and I think more of Southeast Asian countries should should follow what Malaysia is doing. And the underlying issue is that whatever the state earns, whatever the revenue of the state must go back to people, and not into the pockets of individuals or pockets of politicians. So I think it is this motivation that the revenue of the state belongs to people. That is important, and that's something that I think that needs to be spread across the region, at least the region I come from. So on that note, I just want to say that thanks for the invitation for this meeting, Francine. And I just want to make a big push the idea that social policies are important. They make changes to people's lives. If it's meant, and it's very targeted, you can't steal money from people. It all goes to a particular address, a particular person's name. There's no intermediaries. There's no stiffening of money in the process, and so on and so forth. And it is workable. It is doable. Except that we need a good government to do that. There are issues, of course, whether it is sustainable. Yes, there are issues about sustainability. There are issues of how long can the state do it. All of that are there. I'm not saying no. There are those issues, but that has to be dealt with by the state. But the point I want to make is when a state can make people's lives better, can improve quality of lives of people, can make sure people have go to school, can make sure that quality of education in the school is good and improving, food in the house, better jobs, protection for men and women. On that note, thank you very much, and thanks for your attention.